From Channel 4, the local station, this is a Vote 2024 update.
Evening, it's now 7 o'clock, and polls are now closed across much of Florida for the state's primary election in 2024.
Polls are still open for another hour in the parts of the state in the central time zone that's in the Florida Panhandle, but soon we will start to get the first results in local races around Northeast Florida.
So here are some of the local races that we're watching the most closely tonight. There's the Republican primary for state Senate in District 7, which includes St. Johns, Flagler, and Putnam counties, and part of Volusia County. You've probably seen the ads from the two main candidates, Tom Leake and David Shore. We're also monitoring school board races in Duval County. 4 of the board's 7 seats are on the ballot tonight. And there are several sheriff's races in our area. They're in St. Johns, Baker, and Columbia counties.
A live look for you now at the Duval County Supervisor of Election Center on the north side. This is where the votes are being processed. With today's voting technology, the process there is generally pretty fast. We should get our first results even before 7:30.
Yeah, we've been bringing you 2 hours of special coverage tonight. If you're watching us right now on Channel 4, then you can join us in just a moment. We'll be on news4jax.com or News4Jax Plus for our first hour of results and analysis. And then at 8 o'clock, you can join us back here on Channel 4 or stay on our streaming platforms for the most up-to-the-minute coverage of this election.
Wherever you join us in the next 2 hours, we will be joined by this roundtable of local political experts, News4Jax political analyst Rick Mullaney, government law attorney Chris Hand, and pastor and political consultant John Newman. They will be sharing their insights on the races that we're watching tonight.
So stay with us on News4Jax Plus, or we will see you here on Channel 4 at 8 o'clock.
Tonight, the votes are being counted. And while the spotlight in 2024 is on the race for the White House, this is an election night that will directly impact our communities. You are choosing school board members to shape local classrooms, lawmakers to make decisions about the future of Florida, and electing law enforcement leaders. Our team is following the biggest races and breaking down the results with our roundtable of local political experts. From Channel 4, the local station, this is a Vote 2024 special, Florida's primary night on News4Jax Plus.
Right now, elections workers around the state, they are working on tabulating today's votes. You're looking live at the Duval County Election Center. It's on the north side. We should start to see the first results in just a few minutes. Hello, everyone. So over the next 2 hours, we're going to be bringing you results as they come in, and we're going to be looking at dozens of local and state races as we discuss the outcomes and also bring you results across the bottom of your screen.
About half the voters in this primary election cast their ballot early or by mail, and those votes will be among the first results we get very soon. On the ballot was everything from races for Congress to the Florida legislature to local offices.
Yeah, here's a look at some of what we're watching tonight. Across Florida, Republican and Democratic voters made their choices in the party's primaries for the U.S. Senate seat. This is currently held by Rick Scott. He is running for re-election. He is a Republican. In Northeast Florida, it's the race where you've seen countless TV ads. The Republican primary for state Senate District 7. It includes St. Johns, Flagler, and Putnam counties and part of Volusia County. This is the race where the main candidates Tom Leake and David Shore, they've been running attack ads against each other. In Duval County, 4 of the 7 seats for the school board are up for election. There's only 1 incumbent running for re-election, so we'll have at least 3 new school board members. And 3 incumbent sheriffs face primary challengers tonight. That's in St. Johns, Baker, and Columbia counties.
Our News4Jax reporters are all around Northeast Florida tonight, tracking some of the key races. We'll be checking in with them as well as with Scott Johnson, who is in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention.
And News4Jax anchor John Acebus is in studio with us. He's going to be giving giving us county-by-county breakdowns and some of the key races, going into detail about how local communities have voted in this primary election. We're also joined by our roundtable of local political experts who have been with us on big election nights for the past few years, providing insight. This is really a privilege to get their expertise. News4JAX political analyst Rick Mullaney, who's also the director of the Jacksonville University Public Policy Institute. Government law attorney Chris Hand, who brings a lot of experience, a former chief of staff for the city of Jacksonville, as well as a press secretary to U.S. Senator Bob Graham, and a local pastor, a political consultant or analyst for us, John Newman. We love having your insights. Thank you so much to all of you for being with us. And Rick, as we kick things off tonight, what are you watching for in this primary election?
Well, one of the things I think everyone's looking for is this Leak versus Shore race. And I think in North Florida, people have been going, what is going on in that Senate District 7 race? Is this seat that important? And the actual answer to that is not that important. There's something bigger here. And we'll be talking about that tonight. It's really a proxy battle between the trial lawyers and the business community, or trial lawyers and insurance companies, because Leak in part carried the water for tort reform in the legislature, where he was there for 8 years. So that is a real battle. And Trump came in with a late endorsement for Shore. It'll be a test. So another proxy battle is Trump versus DeSantis. They're on opposite sides of this. A second race to keep an eye on, of course, locally, two popular figures, Angie Nixon versus Brenda Priestley Jackson. They're going for the House Senate District 13. And finally, keep an eye out tonight on the school board endorsed candidates by Ron DeSantis. In 2022, he made a big statement statewide, getting so involved. He's doing it in 23 races this year, 3 of those right here in Duval County. That's something to keep an eye on.
And John Newman talking about low voter turnout. Not a whole lot of people out there. Does that have an effect on what you think the outcomes will be, and what are you looking for tonight?
I think the low voter turnout absolutely has an impact. Unfortunately, people, when it's not really a major race in terms of nationalizing elections, people just don't turn out. And so it's really unfortunate because there's so many sacrifices that were made so people can exercise their right to vote. As usual, Rick Mullaney took everything I can. But I'm also looking at the school boards and the juxtaposition of the backers of the school board, the Moms for Liberty and DeSantis. Also, I'm looking at, interestingly enough, I'm also looking at what's going on in the House District 14 as well. With Kimberly Daniels and some of the things that have happened in the past with her, whether that still may haunt her a little bit, maybe not. But I'm also looking really strongly at what's going to happen in the school board races.
Yeah. So, Christiane, that's something that you pointed out to me in terms of things to follow this summer. School board races. And yeah, 4 out of the 7 positions are going to be new school board members.
Well, Kent, this is a pivotal time for the Duval County School Board. As you know, they have a new superintendent of schools, Dr. Christopher Bernier, who started on July the 1st. They're going through a funding crisis. There's a schools facilities debate about whether or not they might close schools in this county. So really a pivotal time for the future of the Duval County Public Schools. There are 7 school board seats. More than half are on the ballot tonight. So effectively, control of the Duval County School Board is going to be decided tonight, or if the one election that has multiple candidates goes to November, in November as well. And of course, Duval County, not the only county that has school board seats. St. John's, Nassau, Clay, counties around Florida. School board, one of the most important forms of local government, touches everybody, teachers, students, families, taxpayers. Going to be watching those very closely to see what the future of the Duval County School Board looks like.
Yeah, and not only here in Duval County, we're talking about new school board members, got a new superintendent, so the dynamic, a lot of new ideas and blood coming in here. Gentlemen, we'll be talking about all this coming up.
Yeah, and now that the polls are closed, elections officials, they're busy tabulating the ballots this evening.
We should start to see the first results posted soon from the early and absentee ballots that were cast before today. To give you an idea of how many votes elections officials will be counting, here's a look at the turnout. In Duval County, 19%. In St. Johns County, 25%. In Clay County, 19%. And in Nassau County, 30%.
Yeah, the News4JAX anchor and reporter Ashley Harding's joining us live from the Duval County Election Center on the north side. It's where Jacksonville's tabulation process is well underway at this point. And Ashley, you're there watching.
Yes, we have, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and show you the tabulation room. Of course, you see Jerry Holland here. You see this group of men. They're looking very closely at these results here. He sees me out here, and Jerry is about to join us. We're going to see what's going on right now. Expect him to come out really any moment. There he is, Supervisor of Elections for Duval County, Jerry Holland. All right, you got something in your hand there, sir. What you got?
Well, we obviously push out the results from early voting and vote by mail first. That's about 70,000 of the voters that have participated in this election of the 122,000 that have voted.
Okay, so are you able to share anything with us right now? Or?
Sure. Obviously, you know, this is about more than 60% of the vote. There are some races that are still very close, you know, that the Election Day vote will make a difference. But some of the races have shown some great separation.
Okay. Low turnout, it seems like. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, at low turnout, we were anticipating that the Election Day vote would be about 50%. Fell below that. And so we're somewhere around 19% turnout. We were hoping for 23 is what we were projecting. But what we noticed around the state, it was low everywhere. So it wasn't just Duval County.
Absolutely. So we know that there's tabulating going on in there. We talked about buses coming up. Can you talk to us about what's happening now?
Yeah, here at the Election Center, what will be happening is obviously the results will start coming back into our office from each of the precincts, but then also all the materials. We don't leave home, we don't go home until tonight everything's back in. The ballots are back in, the memory sticks are back in, everything that we can reconstruct the election with. So that'll start happening here in about 45 minutes.
All right, we'll be standing by for that. So what I'm going to do, thanks so much, Jerry. Appreciate you. He's a busy guy. He's doing lots of things right now. So one thing I do want to show our viewers real quick, though, we're walking down the hallway. So back there was the tabulation room. We're going to start seeing those trucks arrive with ballots, but we're walking down the hallway, kind of like how Jim Piggott used to do, if you remember that. So what I want to show you, though, is back over here, up on the right, is where we're going to be seeing that big screen with all the results. So I just want to give you guys this behind-the-scenes look right here. So just follow me through here, and you do see a couple of journalists are here as well, and that's the screen where we're going to be seeing those results. So it's really interesting to get a look at how this is happening. You know, when we arrived here, it was very low key, but then as soon as the clock struck 7, we started to see some excitement. We heard people clapping here because now the process is really getting started. But obviously it just began, and we're going to keep you guys updated as these results start to come in. I'll send it back to you, Kent.
All right, thank you, Ashley. And yeah, we are seeing that 10 minutes after the polls have closed, we're starting to see some of those early numbers come in. And now back to one of the races that we mentioned and the one that we were watching very closely tonight, the Republican primary for State Senate District 7. The district covers St. John's, Putnam, Flagler, and northern Volusia counties.
The current state senator, Travis Hudson, can't run again due to term limits. And in the Republican primary, Tom Leek and David Shore have been battling it out in those TV ads and touting endorsements. Here's a sample.
Ron DeSantis, Rick Scott, and every local sheriff all say the same thing. Tom Leek for Florida Senate. Florida's top conservatives endorse Tom Leek because they actually know Tom Leek, the one candidate trusted by our governor to fight for freedom, the one candidate trusted by our sheriffs to fight illegal immigration, and the one candidate who's a real Republican. Trump delegate, sheriff-backed, DeSantis endorsed. Tom Leek for Florida Senate.
I've risked my life in uniform fighting for our shared conservative values. I've always done what was right, not what was easy. I'll tell it like it is and never stop fighting for you.
President Trump endorsed Sheriff David Shore because he knows Shore will end taxpayer-funded handouts for illegal immigrants, stop inflation, protect the Second Amendment, and defend conservative values.
President Trump endorsed me because he believes in me, and you can too.
Yeah, Leek and Shore were joined on the ballot by Jerry James, who ran unsuccessfully in the primary in 2022. And at the bottom of your screen just a moment ago, you saw some of those results coming in. It's only 4% reporting so far. But at this point, Tom Leek ahead with 51% of the vote. The winner is going to face Democrat George T. Hill, the second in the general election. That will be in November.
Now, those ads focus on endorsements, a lot of mudslinging going back and forth through so many of them, which can be confusing to voters. What really is the difference between these two candidates?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit of a proxy battle. Keep this in mind. Over $10 million has been spent. This is one of the most expensive races.
It's a state Senate race and $10 million.
A state Senate race. It's one of the most expensive, actually, I've heard some people say, in the country. You go, what is behind that? And as I mentioned earlier, those ads highlight that this is a Trump versus DeSantis, which we can discuss that difference. But there's also the trial lawyers versus the business community and insurance companies, because Leak was in the House for the last 8 years. He's now running for Senate, and he carried the water on tort reform. And for the trial lawyers, that's a really big deal. And they have pumped millions of dollars into this race supporting Shore. The other thing with Leak is that he was one of 100 legislators who supported Ron DeSantis when he ran for president. Then when DeSantis came out, he endorsed Trump, went to the convention, actually voted for Donald Trump. But still, you had Donald Trump going with Shore for a number of reasons, some of it related to insurance. So if you're asking, what is this all about? It's really not even about the candidates as much as it is trial lawyers versus the business community, Trump versus DeSantis. There are differences on issues such as gun control and legalization of marijuana, and some of those issues aren't nearly as great. Instead, what you've seen is this great divide because of what we've just talked about.
So, Chris Hand, you were one of the first people who explained to me what the dynamics were. What's really going on here? Why so much money here? And I heard somebody recently even ask, I don't understand, trial lawyers, everybody deserves their own defense, and trial lawyers, it's not just a defense lawyer out there. Maybe explain what that means when we say trial lawyers versus somebody who's in charge of tort reform.
Well, this is a tale as old as time in Florida politics. We've seen it going back for decades. Conflicts between candidates being supported by the insurance company, or more specifically by the insurance industry or the business community, and candidates supported by, those who represent people who are injured either with property damage or with personal injury. Florida, a couple of years ago, passed an extensive what is called tort reform legislation, which changed how people, to what extent people have access to the courts, when they can file lawsuits, the amount of damages they're able to receive from that. So this is a huge issue for people who practice in that area and for their clients. Also a huge issue for businesses and insurance companies. We've seen this play out in election after election. This is just the most recent, but one of the more high visibility ones. For example, one of the leading opponents of Tom Leak was trial lawyer John Morgan, who cut ads on his own, was very visible on social media opposing Tom Leak in this election. So that dynamic was very raw. It wasn't hidden, wasn't below the surface. What's interesting, Kent, is all the things that we didn't hear discussed in this contest. This is one of the fastest growing parts of Florida, District 7, which has challenges with affordable housing, with property insurance rates, with how to deal with the impacts of growth and infrastructure. Those were not issues that voters heard a lot about over the course of this campaign. They heard about Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis and attacks on the two candidates. Now, looks like perhaps Representative Leak's going to advance to the general election, where he'll face Mr. Hill, as you said earlier. But we've had a campaign with a lot of money invested and not a lot of discussion about some of the actual issues impacting District 7.
Yeah.
All right.
John, I know we want to talk about this in our next time that we talk about this. Really interesting to me that the former sheriff running in this didn't get the endorsement of all the other sheriffs in the state. So let's talk some more about that as we move forward.
Sure.
Well, up next, we will be joined by News4JAX reporter Ariel Schiller reporting on Duval's school board races.
Yeah, a major topic this year is they just got a new superintendent and a number of issues that need to be resolved in Duval County. We'll be right back. About half of Duval County's voters face a choice in the school board race this year. 4 of the board's 7 seats, they're up for election. And these are nonpartisan races open to all voters in each district, regardless of party affiliation.
These elections come at a critical time for the board. The district has a new superintendent we mentioned earlier. Schools are facing lower enrollments in light of other education options. And the district is grappling with this budget shortfall in its plan to renovate and rebuild schools. Now, in District 1, school board member Kelly Coker is not seeking re-election. The district covers parts of Arlington and the northeast corner of Jacksonville. This race between Nadine Embry, who spent 10 years working in the Duval County school system, and Tony Ricardo, who was a former teacher at Andrew Jackson High School and New Covenant Christian Academy. Also, District 3, that covers San Marco, Lakewood, and parts of Mandarin and the South Side. School board member Cindy Pearson is seeking re-election. She said her goal within the next 4 years is to see improvements in student attendance, engagement, and achievement. She is up against Rebecca Nathanson, who pointed out that one of her top issues in this race is the literacy crisis, saying that right now about half of all DCPS students are not reading at grade level.
And again, these results that you're seeing on the screen, not that many votes in so far. District 5, this includes downtown, Riverside, Avondale, Ortega, and parts of northwest Jacksonville and the west side. Board member Warren Jones can't seek re-election due to term limits. So we have Reginald Blount, who is an adjunct professor and assessment coordinator at FSCJ. Nashawn Nix worked on Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan's transition committee for transportation. And Hank Rogers started his professional journey as an assistant in the Florida House of Representatives. Again, those votes coming in, just getting underway here. And if no candidate tonight gets more than 50% of this vote, the top 2 vote getters will advance to the November general election. And in District 7, school board member Lori Hershey, she's out of office because of term limits coming up here. So the district that we're talking about here, it covers parts of Mandarin in the south side. Melody Bolduc has been a teacher for 24 years. She also ran for the seat in 2016. Sarah Mannion is an attorney, and this is the first time she's run for public office. You see the results coming in right now there as well.
Over the last few months, some of these school board candidates have been getting their message out to voters through candidate forums.
News4Jax reporter Ariel Schiller, she's talked with these board candidates at those events and in other interviews. She's our expert on Duval County school board race tonight. She's joining us now live with a closer look at these races. Ariel?
Kent, like you said, I've talked to nearly every one of those school board candidates that are running for election in these races. The one we're paying closer attention to is District 3 because that's the only race in this election that has a current school board member running for re-election. Cindy Pearson is hoping to serve a second term on the school board. She's being challenged by Rebecca Nathanson, who's hoping to serve her first term on the school board. Nathanson was also one of the Duval school board candidates endorsed by Governor Ron DeSantis. I spoke with both candidates today about their first actions in office once they're elected. What is the first thing that you'll do if you're elected to school board?
One of the first things I want to do probably is schedule a meeting with the CFO to learn more about the budget process and the basic fundamentals of understanding the budget and the financial allocations of the district.
And why is that important to you?
Because I think that just the spotlight has been shined on the $1.4 billion shortfall that the district is facing related to the master facilities plan. But part of that is because the district has lost 30,000 students, and now that funding follows students, we have to get a handle on how we're managing our money and how we're allocating our money.
You know, if you're reelected to this seat, what is the first thing you want to do if you're elected?
Sure. Well, keep doing what I've been doing. We are currently voting on the budget. We're currently having discussions about school closures and consolidations. We are starting to talk about transportation. We are starting to, I've been working with Florida School Boards Association, putting together a legislative agenda, and so I'll continue doing the work on the state level as well. And so for me, there's not a huge learning curve. There's always new stuff to learn, but for me, there's not a huge learning curve. It's continuing the work that I've been doing and adding to it.
should be interesting to see how that election turns out. Again, like we've been saying, districts 1, 5, and 7 all have new people running for those seats. Polls closed at 7 p.m., so we'll have those results as they come in on air and online at news4jax.com. Reporting live, Ariel Schiller, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Ariel, thank you. Folks, we want to bring in a roundtable into this conversation here. Now, while these school board races are technically nonpartisan, in recent years they have really taken on a more partisan feel.
This election cycle, the second one in a row where Governor Ron DeSantis endorsed a slate of board candidates around the state of Florida. So about a month ago, he posted this graphic on social media naming those endorsements. They included candidates in 3 of Duval County's 4 races. Tony Ricardo in District 1, Rebecca Nathanson in District 3, and Melanie Bolduc in District 7.
All right, John Newman, we're going to start with you. What do these endorsements and just the fact that the governor's getting into the weeds in these school board races, what does that say about these races?
It says that a lot of the races, going back to a phrase or a term that Rick used in the last segment, it's really proxy wars. It's about what side is still continuing a fight that goes back, you know, it could be years, actually, or just one election where things could have been different had somebody not endorsed somebody else, and they continue to carry that on through continual electoral seasons. And I really think that at the end of the day, it really kind of cheapens the process, because people kind of really don't look at the candidates, they look at the people supporting the candidates. And as critical as education is, it really shouldn't be about the perimeter, or it shouldn't be about the other folk who are supporting folks. It should be, what do those candidates stand for? How will they affect my children? And how can we make the school system better? And I think when other folks are coming in, I think that really hurts the process.
Well, Chrisanne, one of the things that I just noticed is this is nonpartisan. Each candidate doesn't have an R, NP, Independent, Democrat. It doesn't have any of that. But it sure seems like in order to figure out who you're voting for, you have to almost figure out, okay, who is supporting them, who is pushing them. In this case, we were talking about Governor DeSantis getting behind several candidates.
Well, Kent, in 1998, Florida voters made it very clear that they wanted school board races to be nonpartisan. That was on the ballot that year. And since then, particularly in the last decade, we have seen more and more movement of partisan or ideological forces involved in these school board races. Theoretically, you know, the teaching of children, supporting teachers, all the work of a school board district really doesn't have a D or an R after it. But there's been an increasing trend in that regard in recent years, probably culminating not just in what's happened in these school board races, but of course in November, Amendment 1 on the ballot would take these nonpartisan school board races and make them partisan again. So that's been a trend in recent years. We'll have to see. Some of these races are very close so far tonight. We'll have to see whether the governor's endorsement has a significant impact and whether that trend continues, and of course in the November ballot as well.
And Rick Mullaney, we were talking, Chris alluded to it, 4 out of the 7 school board members here in Duval County, new superintendent. What does this mean? The fact that we could be seeing new people in these positions.
Well, Chris mentioned it earlier, and crisis may be too strong a word, but not by too much. What Duval County, what public education is facing in Duval County. I say that as someone who graduated from public schools here in high school. I say that as someone whose father, after military service, taught for 20 years at Westside High School. When we talk about decreasing enrollment, a few years ago we were at 120,000, which was stable. It wasn't really moving up with a growing county. Then it was at 107, and now it's 98,000. The enrollment drop is significant. The budget is significant. The people of Duval County stepped up with a half-cent sales tax for $1.9 billion for capital improvements. They also stepped up with an ad valorem tax of $1 million for greater compensation for teachers. The people of Jacksonville want a better public education system, and they're willing to invest in it, historic investment. So what this means in answer to your question is these races matter for that future. But it's interesting that we get bogged down in the partisanship. But look at District 3. They're both Republicans. So it's beyond just the party registration. Pearson is an incumbent. She's a Republican. Her challenger is endorsed by Governor DeSantis, another Republican. So there's something even more going on, as alluded to with John. In 3 of the races in which Governor DeSantis has endorsed, at least the early results are such that 2 of the ones he's endorsed are trailing. We'll have to see if that plays out tonight. One of the things to keep an eye on tonight is 2022 versus 2024. In 2022, Florida went deep red, not just red, deep red, in congressional races and school board races. in the governor's race. And so tonight maybe is a little bit of an indication of what's to come in November. But keep an eye on these races for two reasons. One, the governance of Duval County. Two, what does it mean as we look to November? And for Governor DeSantis and his endorsements.
Thank you, Rick. And for those of you living in one of our largest growing counties, we're going to talk about the sheriff's race.
St. Johns County residents have mixed feelings about the speed of growth in the county, and protecting the people who already live there. That's a large task. We're going to check in to see who the people want. Former Florida governor, now U.S. Senator Rick Scott, is seeking his second term on Capitol Hill.
You've probably seen his ads where he's focusing on the Democrats. Scott faced John Columbus, who describes himself as a theater professional, and Keith Gross, a businessman and venture capitalist. Those results coming in clearly in favor of Senator Scott right now. As far as who Scott will be going up against in November on the Democratic side, 4 candidates in that party's primary: Stanley Campbell, former Navy pilot who now runs a healthcare technology company; entrepreneur Rod Joseph; former South Florida Congresswoman Debbie McCarsell-Powell on the far left there, 70% of the vote so far; and attorney and former state representative from the Tampa area, Brian Rush. All right, every even-numbered election year, every seat in the U.S. House is up for election.
This year, 3 of our 4 Northeast Florida representatives faced a challenger in their Republican Party's primary. Republican Congresswoman Kat Cammack is seeking re-election in Florida's 3rd Congressional District, which covers all of North Central Florida, including Alachua, Bradford, Columbia, Union counties, and all or part of 7 other counties stretching all the way to the Gulf Coast. She easily is defeating her one Republican primary challenger, Alex Stevens, who has no formal political experience. Just 10% of the vote in, but already 88% are voting for Kat Cammack. She will likely now face Democrat Tom Wells in November. Now, in District 5, made up of parts of Duval and St. Johns counties, U.S. Representative John Rutherford, also the former Jacksonville sheriff, is seeking his 5th term in Congress. He is easily defeating his one Republican primary challenger, Mara Macy, 67% to 33%. We see 71% of the votes counted. Rutherford will likely advance now to the November election to face Democrat Jay McGovern and a write-in candidate. Now, incumbent U.S. Representative Michael Waltz not Walz, Waltz, is seeking re-election in District 6, which covers southern St. Johns County, Putnam and Flagler counties, and parts of eastern Marion and northern Volusia counties. He's defeated his Republican primary challenger, John Grow, it looks like. I know just 2% reporting, but he has already been declared the winner. Waltz will likely face Democrat James David Stockton III in the November general election.
And as we focus on state and local races in Florida, on the national political scene, the focus is in Chicago, and on the Democratic National Convention, we're taking a live look right now at the United Center.
The convention's second night just got underway, and speaking later on this evening is former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. News4JAX reporter Scott Johnson is in Chicago. He's joining us live right now. Scott.
Joy, is a busy night number 2 as we are planning on former President Barack to come out and give the final address in a few for night number 2. Of course, is also going to be speaking the former First Lady. And you have a lot of Florida delegates inside. And as I said on the news earlier, they're kind of half paying attention to what's going on inside. They're also half looking at like their new app, paying attention to what's going on back where you Florida, in Jacksonville, in Northeast Florida, watching those primary results come in for the election tonight. It's kind of a big deal for a lot of them. So they're monitoring these because they're elections. They're going to be monitoring turnout. So one of the people in town from Jacksonville was Jimmy Peluso, Jacksonville City Council. I talked to him, and he says, you know, turnout for these August elections are never that great, but he's looking at the margins, the fine lines. He says they look pretty good. He feels good about Democrats showing up to the polls in November.
In Duval County, we're seeing, kind of low turnout numbers at the moment. We're seeing probably higher engagement on the Democratic side than probably we have in other years. There's not a lot of like super competitive races that are driving out a ton of people to the polls at the moment. But, those school board races are key.
Let me ask you this. When you hear, maybe then tonight, voters, Democrats in Jacksonville see low turnout numbers, you don't think that translates to enthusiasm in November?
No, I don't, because you got to talk to the voter base, right? And right now there aren't like super competitive R versus D races.
And so, if you watch on news4jax.com or on the 10 and 11 o'clock news, you're going to see images inside here where the Bulls play of thousands and thousands of people. These are not just regular people in the crowd. These are political activists, your elected officials from around the country that go back to their communities like in Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia. This is to get them energized, to go back and pump up voters and get them to say, hey, I may not have gone out tonight or today to vote in an off election, a primary, but they need to energize them to go out and vote in November for the presidency, for the U.S. Congress, and all those other races. So critical. So that's kind of what they're doing tonight here at the United Center, is energizing the party activists and the faithful and the loyalists to go out and energize voters to cast their vote in November. For now, we are live in Chicago. Scott Johnson, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Scott, we'll be seeing you a little later on. We apologize for all that glitching. We're going to work on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people trying to get
signals out of there
in Chicago right now. So the main theme tonight at the DNC is flipping from past to present. We heard from current President Joe Biden last night, passing the torch to the VP. Chris, let's start here with some of your opinions here. Does this look like a different Democratic Party with Kamala Harris at the top instead of Joe Biden?
No question, Kent. We were all here on June 27th, the night of the debate between President Biden and former President Trump. And at that point, particularly after that debate, there was a lot of concern among Democrats about how the general election might play out with those two candidates. Think of how far we've come in less than 2 months. In just the last month, Vice President Harris has become the Democratic nominee. She chose Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota as her running mate. So you really are seeing a uniting and energizing of the party that didn't exist just a short time ago. We're seeing that reflected at the convention, which is very deliberately moving, as you say, from the past to the future. President Biden spoke last night. Former President Obama and Michelle Obama are talking tonight, leading up to, of course, Thursday night, when Vice President Harris will make her acceptance speech.
Everybody, of course, waiting for those big names to talk tonight. But you know, Kamala Harris won't be there tonight, John. She's actually at a campaign event with her VP running mate. Is that a good move to not be at the convention? We remember the RNC when Donald Trump was there for every single day of the RNC. But Kamala Harris is at where the RNC was holding this campaign event tonight.
What I think, Joy, that whenever you can get before constituents, prospective voters, get out there and do it, particularly in terms of the proximity of the event to where the convention is being held, is not a very difficult thing to do logistically. The other thing, too, is that, I'm going to be careful how I say this, Kamala doesn't need the basking in the glow of attention, so she doesn't have to be there every night. But so she's going out. I know I'm in trouble for saying that.
You were tiptoeing. Yeah,
I was tiptoeing a little bit. Yeah. So she doesn't need that. You know, she's taking advantage of the fact that there's an audience out there she can reach, and it's a swing state, and she's not going to pass up that opportunity. And why do that when all she's going to do is be lauded upon in there, not reaching anybody?
Yeah. So, Rick, what do you think the message will be from the former First Lady, the former President, the Obamas, when they speak tonight at the DNC?
Well, you're going to see a shift from last night looking backward. Joe Biden gave us the big speech. He was the headliner last night, of course. Abortion was front and center. The unity of the Democratic Party. But with Joe Biden, what he did was not naturally touting his own accomplishments. Then there was the handoff to Kamala Harris and looking to the future. That was by design that Joe Biden was last night, and tonight is by design with Barack Obama and Michelle. It is now looking to the future, and it is now reintroducing Kamala Harris to the American people. You're going to see the bio, the introduction, the laying of the groundwork, and of course for a big presentation on Thursday. Every now and then they surprise you with an appearance. Kamala Harris did that last night at the Democratic Convention, but I do expect the Obamas, and they do it in a very persuasive, powerful way in a convention hall that is energized and excited. There's great unity against Donald Trump and unity for Kamala Harris. I expect them to reintroduce her, to build for the future. It won't be looking to the past. It'll be very much laying the groundwork in the future.
Yes.
It also gives her a chance, Rick, to try out something new as she's being introduced to the broader community. People don't know her. So what is her message? What are her policies? You may want to pay attention to see what she says tonight at that rally, because they may be trying something new in terms of reaching out with a different message.
Running campaigns, Chris, is it important for her husband, who is going to be speaking about her and giving a more personal view, and we only have a little bit of time, but is it important to get to know her personally? Do voters need to find out more about her?
Joy, political consultants like to say that there are three imperatives in every campaign. Define yourself, define your opponent, define the stakes of the election. That part of defining yourself, very much like what John just said, is a key priority for Vice President Harris. Doug Emhoff, her husband, can certainly provide some personal perspective there, but so much of this convention is about forging a direct relationship between Kamala Harris and the American public. She's been vice president for the past 4 years. Now she's the presidential nominee, so that direct personal relationship, making sure voters know who she is and what she believes, key goal of this convention.
And Doug Emhoff will be one of the speakers tonight at the Democratic National Convention as well. Thank you very much for your opinions there. All right, shifting back a little locally, St. Johns County voters who make up a very quickly growing population. They face choices in some heated races this election. As we've mentioned, State Senate District 7, and then the race between David Shore and Tom Leake, that includes St. Johns County.
Republican voters there also had a primary election for sheriff on their ballots. Sheriff Rob Hardwick is seeking a second term. Challenging him is Jim Priester, a 27-year veteran of the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. He then retired in order to run for sheriff, with 85% of the precincts reporting in. 73% of the vote has already gone to Rob Hardwick. Now, while there's no Democratic candidate in the race, because a write-in candidate did qualify for the general election, the primary today was only open to Republican voters. News4JAX reporter Janice Harris joining us live from the St. Johns County Supervisor of Elections office with a look at some of the top races in that community. Janice?
Well, this has been a very precinct in Nocatee where I am. In fact, one of the two individuals running in this race, Jim Priester, he was here just in the last hour. I also spoke with the current Sheriff Hardwick as well. We'll be headed to his watch party just minutes after we talk to you now. But I talk with both candidates, and they have very different perspectives on how the office should be run. Sheriff Hardwick said he believes he has made some really important impacts at the office, including raising salaries for the employees, in addition to reducing crime by 10%. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. Since you've been in office, what do you feel like you've improved upon for the citizens of St. Johns County? And if you're reelected, what do you want to change, improve, modify if as reelected as sheriff?
You know, one thing we're proud of here is the recruiting retention, the increases in pay for our employees. Just 4 years ago, I took over our dispatchers, our 911 operators, our PSTs. You know, we're making low $30,000 a year. You know, fast forward now, they're over $50,000 a year. We're at full staff in our 911 center. We also talk about our deputy sheriff's pay, same thing, low 40s. This year, if the budget's approved, we'll be right around $60,000.
And also I talked with Jim Priester. He is a retired St. Johns County lieutenant. He also worked with Sheriff Hardwick, and he told me that he feels like one of the reasons he decided to be a part of this race is because he says he believes that Sheriff Hardwick has not been a good leader. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I think our current administration lacks fiscal responsibility. We've had a increase in our budget of almost $38 million. And, you know, we have given our deputies and our employees raises, but not $38 million worth. We waste money, and I think the excessive spending needs to be brought under control. And we would know that if we had transparency. And right now we don't have transparency, such as our county has lost their voice.
I spoke with the sheriff just as I'm interviewing you now, and he said that he feels that one of his accomplishments is the fact that he has gotten crime down by 10%, that there's been an improvement there. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I say that's false. That is a political answer. I'm a fourth-generation cop, not a politician. And I can tell you, being in law enforcement, serving the citizens and visitors of St. Johns County for the last 27 years at this one agency, we have a problem. Well, crime is on the rise, and we're not doing anything to address it. We want to tell everybody everything's okay. Well, it's not.
According to the supervisor of elections, as far as these campaigns, $388,000 for Hardwick in monetary contributions, and for this race, Priester had over $84,000. But as results are starting to come in, it's becoming apparent who may likely win in this particular primary race. Reporting live in St. Johns County, Janice Harris, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you, Janice. And yeah, so obviously talking about the quickly growing St. Johns County.
And coming up in just a little bit, we're going to go through some of the county commission races. They all have a point of view of tackling the rapid development.
Thanks for being with us for our elections coverage tonight. And we want to recap one of the biggest races we're following this evening, the closely watched Republican primary in State Senate District 7.
The district, that includes St. Johns, Putnam, and Flagler counties, part of Volusia County, and it's an open seat this year. Tom Leake and David Shore have been battling it out in the Republican primary, with Jerry James on the ballot as well. 21% of the votes in so far, and 50% of those voting have gone for Tom Leake. We're going to go right now to John Acebis to take a county-by-county look at the results so far. John?
Yeah, it's nice to actually see this race play out. We have all seen the ads. I think I've gone to sleep and dreamed and heard the ads between David Shore and Tom Leake. So let's get right to that part of our map. State seat, District 7 right here. So the votes that we're seeing with Tom Leake out 50% with 8,600 votes rather are driven by Putnam and Flagler counties. You're going to see the white here in St. Johns. That's because we're not seeing any votes. Total votes or precincts reporting. You're going to see the same thing down here in Volusia. So these votes between David Shore, Jerry James, and Tom Leake are all driven between Putnam County, where Tom Leake is up 49% with 3,200 votes. Behind him, David Shore at 33%. He's about 1,000 votes behind Tom Leake. Jerry James, 2,000 out from Tom Leake. This has been a very interesting race. We know that David Shore was endorsed by President or former President Donald Trump. Tom Leake, obviously endorsed by Ron DeSantis, but he's got all of the sheriffs of each of these counties. So right now, what we're seeing, the votes with Tom Leake ahead, driven by Putnam and Volusia County, or Flagler County, excuse me. So as we go through the night and into this 8 o'clock hour, we'll get more votes and, of course, bring you that information.
All righty, John, thank you. Well, this election, St. Johns County voters saw 3 county commission races on their ballot, and these races are getting an unusual level of attention.
First of all, campaign signs are all over the county, and we're seeing numerous TV ads as well, both in support of candidates and then attacking some. And then about 10 days ago, former President Donald Trump weighed in. He gave an endorsement with this post on his Truth Social platform. He says, "The Trump Club of St. Johns County has been with me from the very beginning," eventually going on to endorse 3 incumbents: Christian Whitehurst, Roy Alamo, and Henry Dean. 3 of the 5 commission seats were on the ballot for the Republican primary.
All registered Republican voters in the county could vote in all 3 races. Incumbent St. Johns County Commissioner Christian Whitehurst is seeking re-election in District 1. He faces 2 challengers in the Republican primary, Anne Marie Evans and Weston Ferguson. Whitehurst and Evans, who responded to our questions about their campaign, both said this is a growing county and that the growth in population needs to be addressed, whether it's public safety or overdevelopment. There are no Democrats running for this seat, only a write-in opponent in November for the winner of this primary.
See the results right there, pretty close right now. Incumbent St. Johns County Commissioner Roy Alamo seeking re-election in District 3. He's noted that infrastructure solutions to improve traffic, that's an issue that they're working on improving. He faces 3 challengers in this Republican primary: Heather Harley Davidson, who's owned a number of companies in St. Johns County, including 2 restaurants. Clay Murphy owns a local barbecue restaurant. Both of them say the rapid overdevelopment in the county concerns them. By the way, Murphy ahead right now, as you see the results there. And then toward the bottom of the stats right there, Michael McDonald, who says that his family has strong ties to the area, having been there more than 50 years. No Democratic candidates in the race, but there is a write-in candidate who qualified, which is why the primary today was only open to Republican voters. Incumbent County Commissioner Henry Dean seeking re-election in District 5. And one of his main topics of focus is conserving land and protecting the environment. He faces 2 challengers in the Republican primary, John Higbee III, and then right now leading in the votes right there, Ann Taylor. No Democrats in this race as well. So a candidate running without party affiliation, Merrill Paul Rowland, will be on the general election ballot in November to whoever wins this Republican primary. Again, votes coming in there. 96% reporting right now, and Ann Taylor with a lead of about 1,600 votes over incumbent Henry Dean. All right, don't go anywhere. A quick recap of tonight's largest races before the top of the hour.
Another look at State Senate, School Board, and St. Johns County Sheriff.
Another look at the Republican primary for State Senate District 7, this heated race between David Shore and Tom Leek. The winner is going to face Democrat George T. Hill in the general election in November. For 39% reporting so far, you see Tom Leek with about 50% of the vote.
And for St. Johns County Sheriff Rob Hardwick is seeking a second term. Challenging him is Jim Priester, a 27-year veteran of the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, who retired in order to run. There you see almost all of the votes in, with 73% going to Rob Hardwick, 27% going to Jim Priester. No Democratic candidate in the race because a write-in candidate did qualify for the general election.
All right, don't go anywhere. At the top of our 8 o'clock hour, even more results, and you can keep watching the live stream. Will also be on Channel 4. See you in just a moment. And get back into it. Here's a mic check for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hi, Ike. Okie-doke.
I can.
Tonight, the votes are being counted. And while the spotlight in 2024 is on the race for the White House, this is an election night that will directly impact our communities. You are choosing school board members to shape local classrooms, lawmakers to make decisions about the future of Florida, and electing law enforcement leaders. Our team is following the biggest races and breaking down the results with our roundtable of local political experts. From Channel 4, the local station, this is a Vote 2024 special, Florida's primary night.
Polls closed across Northeast Florida about an hour ago. As you look live at the Duval County Election Center on the north side, results should be fleshed out a little bit more in this 8 o'clock hour. And checking in on some of the top races that we're following tonight in the Republican primary for State Senate District 7. 40% of the vote is in right now. More than 32,000 votes have been cast, and almost 17,000 of those votes have gone to Tom Leek. He is leading in this Republican primary over David Shore and Jerry James. And then looking at one of our Duval County 4 school board races that are on the ballot in District 3 between incumbent Cindy Pearson and challenger Rebecca Nathanson. This is very, very close, just a few hundred votes separating them right now. And in the Republican primary for sheriff in St. Johns County, that is a landslide so far. Rob Hardwick, with 98% of the votes already being counted, has 73% of those votes, more than 29,000 voters selecting him to return as sheriff of St. Johns County. And hello, everyone. As the night goes on, we're getting a clearer picture of who's going to be moving on to the general election in dozens of local races, or in some cases, winning the election outright to those offices.
But we want to remind you, we'll be bringing you results along the bottom of your screen all throughout the night. Tonight, we have a team of News4JAX reporters covering key races in our area, as well as Scott Johnson, who's live in Chicago on the second night of the Democratic National Convention. Right now, though, we want to go back to one of the races we told you about a moment ago, the Republican primary in State Senate District 7.
Yeah, this is the race that's been the topic of countless political ads over the last few months. The district includes St. Johns, Flagler, and Putnam counties, and then part of Volusia County, and it's an open seat this year. The state senator, Travis Hudson, who is there, is term limited, so this is open. And Tom Leake, David Shore, they were battling it out. Jerry James also on the ballot. The winner will face Democrat George T. Hill in the general election in November. So let's go now to John Acebas for a county-by-county breakdown of tonight's primary results in the state Senate race. John, I know one of the things we're looking at is, hey, has Volusia or St. John's, are they reporting now? They weren't just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, the last time we saw Flagler and Putnam counties checking in. Now we've got Volusia, Flagler, and Putnam counties. These are driving the votes, and I'm actually going to pull back out and zoom back in so we can get those total votes for what we're seeing. Tom Leake with 52% of the votes, nearly 17,000 votes. That's with now 41% of the votes tallied and 41% of all the precincts. So that's what we're looking at a broad view here. St. Augustine checking in with, it looks like 0% of the votes, obviously, and 0% of the precincts. But let's go county by county, and I'll turn on the heat map. That'll show you which race is a little bit closer than the others, so kind of an indicator here. Tom Leake's still leading. I don't even think it's a shade of red, but here in Putnam County, he's got 48% of the votes with nearly 3,800. David Shore at 33% and 2,600 votes down here in this part of Volusia. Tom Leake with 59% of the votes, heavily leading over David Shore and Jerry James. And we'll sneak right back up here to Flagler. That's where Tom Leake has 50% of the votes. So one more time, I'll just hit this button right here and we'll go back to this region. Tom Leake, 16,899 votes. That's with 41% of all the votes counted and 41% of the precincts reporting. So, of course, as we go through this 8 o'clock hour, we'll get a better picture. But right now, Tom Leake with a heavy lead.
Well, John, before you go, so are any of the votes coming in St. Johns County? Are we seeing any of those reported? Because that's a big deal. One of the candidates here is the former St. Johns County sheriff.
Absolutely. So it's very interesting, and that's a county that the current sheriff has actually endorsed Tom Leake, but right now we're seeing 0% votes and 0% precincts reporting.
It's going to be key. Right. It's going to be key. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. We now want to bring in our roundtable of local political experts who are with us tonight. News4JAX political analyst Rick Mullaney, also the executive director of the Jacksonville University Public Policy Institute.
We also have government law attorney Chris Hand, who also brings experience as a former chief of staff for the city of Jacksonville and as a press secretary for Senator Bob Graham.
And John Newman is with us, a political contributor, a local pastor, and a man with a lot of expertise here. Our whole panel is. So let's dig into what's happening in the state primary. Chris, why don't you start? Those results, they shocking so far? I mean, how do you view this?
Well, if you live in District 7 and you haven't heard anything about this race, Kent, it means you haven't watched TV, checked your mail, or checked your text messages in the last couple of months. Massive spending on this race from a variety of different interests. It's attracted national attention. Former President Donald Trump made an endorsement in this race, thought to be very closely contested, and we're still tracking it, obviously. But as of right now, State Representative Tom Leake leading this election substantially over his two opponents. We'll have to see what happens when those St. Johns County votes come in. But as of right now, it looks like he may be moving on to November.
Well, Rick Mullaney, I can't help but think every time I see all of this negative ad flying back and forth, I think about Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan and her race against Daniel Davis. All of the negative campaigning was coming one way, and she chose not to go that route. And voters rose above that and saw past that. Is that a possibility here? Do you think maybe that might bleed into elsewhere?
No.
Oh.
let me just say why I say that so shortly.
No, and then you put a period on it. No, end of sentence. Yeah.
In Senate District number 7, it has gotten attention not only in North Florida and statewide, it's gotten some national attention. It has raised over $10 million, one of the most expensive in the state of Florida and one of the most expensive in the country. Why? Well, let me get this straight. There's 40 Senate seats in the state legislature in Florida. Is this one so important? It's not. It's because it's a proxy battle. And our proxy battle, trial lawyers in particular versus the business community and insurance interests. Why? Because Tom Leak, in part, carried the water on tort reform. He's been in the state legislature for 8 years, very close to Governor DeSantis. Tort reform is a very big priority, and he was a big part of that tort reform. And so he has the endorsement of Governor DeSantis, of Rick Scott, of all the sheriffs in that area. Now, Mr. Shore, by the way, Sheriff Shore, very popular sheriff in St. Johns County. Want to see what those results are. Late, he had the endorsement of Donald Trump. And this is sort of Donald Trump, another proxy battle, Donald Trump versus Governor DeSantis. For Donald Trump in particular, he knows that Mr. Leak, when he was in the legislature, was one of 100 legislators who supported Governor DeSantis when he ran for president. When DeSantis dropped out, he then supported Donald Trump. So you have the trial lawyers concerned about tort reform versus the business community and those insurance companies. You have Ron DeSantis versus Donald Trump. Makes for some interesting coalitions here. This has less been about policy. If you take a look at their differences, for example, on gun control or marijuana or spending, they're not hugely far apart. But what you do have are some other issues, and that's why you've seen the negative. You just started this question off with how negative it's been. It has been very negative as each side has tried to define the other side as the liberal in the race. I'm the true conservative in the race. Go with me, I'm the conservative, because in the end, this district will go Republican.
And John Newman, I definitely wanted to hear from you before we got away from this. You said one of the things that is a key for you is who is endorsing Tom Leak. And I pointed out at last hour when we were streaming, hey, all the sheriffs endorse the guy who isn't a former sheriff. You mentioned Sheriff Chitwood is a key for you.
Yes, Michael Jude Chitwood, who was probably one of the most decorated detectives in Philadelphia police history. And of course, now he is the sheriff of Lucille County. Let me tell you how much credibility this guy has. If I was walking outside and with blue skies without a cloud, and Chitwood got in my ear and said, it's getting ready to rain gravy, I'd be going right to a restaurant to get some bucket and some biscuits. That's just how much credibility that guy has. He's a straight shooter. He doesn't care who else endorsed Leak. If he thought something was wrong with his candidacy, he wouldn't do it. A lot of credibility. He's a really good guy, independent in terms of his political persuasion, and he really is an independent. And to the other, real quickly, I think a lot of times all this money, again, to reiterate it just cheapens the whole process. And on some level, people are getting sick of it, even though they're going to continue to do it because negative ads work. But it is what it is.
A lot of us go, oh, that's too bad. It's unfortunate that the negative ads work, because you're right, we're going to keep seeing them.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you to our roundtable, and we'll be back with them during this hour. These days, though, the vote counting process, it tends to move pretty quickly in Florida.
Soon after polls close, we get the results from many of the early and mail-in votes, and the rest of the results, they're generally completed within like an hour or two. For an idea of how many votes had to be counted, here's turnout around Northeast Florida for this primary. In Duval County, you see 19%. In St. Johns County, 25%. In Clay County, 19%. And in Nassau County, 30%.
News4JAX anchor Ashley Harding is joining us live from the Duval County Election Center on the north side, where Jacksonville's tabulation process is underway. Ashley.
Yes, actually, we're here in the back where these trucks have pulled up, and they've got these bags, yellow bags of ballots, kind of explaining how this works. Right now, of course, is Jerry Holland, Duval County Supervisor of Elections. We're looking at an assembly line here. What's the latest right now?
Well, right now we're very pleased. We've gotten all the precincts to report but one, and that one will be uploading soon. But what you've got tonight is everything at the precinct coming back so we can account for it. So if we have to do a recount, we know where all the ballots are. We can start tomorrow, whatever we have to do.
Excellent. We know that there was an issue with the website. Did that slow anything down? We don't like hearing those things, do we?
No, we don't. And it was a statewide issue with the vendor VR Systems out of Tallahassee. And basically what it was causing was a very slow down of us reporting on the website. On our end of accumulating the votes and bringing those, everything was fine on our end.
Very good. Explain to us what we're seeing right now. It's got a whole group group of people here. What are they doing? What are they checking?
Yeah, what they're looking for right now is as the bags come in, everything's color-coded. So the actual ballots that have been voted are in a certain bag. We want to make sure we secure those tonight for any reason to do a recount. Then also the thumb drives that captured the votes also, that's coming back. Provisional ballots are coming back in. So everything we need that's important to the election will come back in tonight.
Would you say overall tonight's been pretty good?
I've been pleased. I mean, there's like anything, a primary typically will work out a lot of the bugs because, again, they haven't had an election since March, these poll workers, but it works out a lot of the bugs for the November. And November will be the Super Bowl of elections, 75 to 80% turnout. So it'll be something we have to be prepared for.
Excellent. Any last thoughts? Anything I didn't say that you want to wrap up with as we get closer to the finish line?
Well, we appreciate the voters who came out, and we're looking forward to those in November. And make sure in November vote early, because if you don't, you'll have long lines in November.
All right, Jerry, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Just going to show you guys once again what's happening here. These are all workers, and you see at the end of their tables, these are their stations. That's where those ballots are coming in. So we did see at least one truck, possibly some more coming in. So that really gives you the behind-the-scenes look of how this is working. Of course, we're keeping our eyes on this, and we'll keep you guys updated. Kent and Joy, I'll send it back.
All right, thank you, Ashley. And up next, we're going to check back in with News4JAX reporter Ariel Schiller reporting on Duval County's school board races.
A major topic this year is they just got a new superintendent, and a number of issues need to be resolved. We will be right back.
Thanks for staying with us tonight. About half of Duval County's voters faced a choice in a school board race this year. 4 of the board's 7 seats are up for election. These are nonpartisan races. They're open to all voters in each district, regardless of party affiliation.
These elections, they come at a crucial time for the school board. The district has a new superintendent. Schools are facing lower enrollments in light of other education opportunities. And the district is grappling with this budget shortfall and its plan to renovate and rebuild schools. Let's take a look at District 1. School board member Kelly Coker not seeking re-election. The district, it covers parts of Arlington and the northeast corner of Jacksonville. The race between Nadine Embry, who it's awfully close, but 100% of the precincts in Embry reporting here, we're seeing that Tony Ricardo is ahead 54% to 46%. We are going to take a look at now.
District 3 is the other, yeah.
Let's take a look at District 3, where it covers San Marco, Lakewood, parts of Mandarin, the South Side. School board member Cindy Pearson seeking re-election. She said her goal within the next 4 years is to see improvements in student attendance, engagement, achievement. She is up against Rebecca Nathanson, who pointed out that one of her top issues in the race is the literacy crisis. 100% of the votes in Cindy Pearson, 51% to 49%.
Separated by fewer than 300 votes right
now. Wow. All right, now let's take a look at District 5.
Yeah, District 5 includes downtown, Riverside, Avondale, Ortega, and parts of northwest Jacksonville and the west side. Board member Warren Jones wasn't able to seek re-election due to term limits, so we've got Reginald Blount is an adjunct professor and assessment coordinator at FSCJ with 41% of the votes right now. Nashawn Nix worked on Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan's transition committee for transportation. He's in third right now, 19%. And Hank Rogers started his professional journey as an assistant in the Florida House of Representatives. He's got 40% of the vote here. There are a few more precincts to report here. We're at 96% reporting there. If no candidate tonight gets more than 50% of the vote, and it looks very, very unlikely, right? The top 2 vote getters would advance to the November general election. And in District 7, school board member Lori Hershey not seeking re-election due to term limits. District covers parts of Mandarin on the south side, and Melanie Bolduc has been a teacher for 24 years. She also ran for the seat in 2016. She is going to be elected here. Sarah Mannion, an attorney, this was the first time that she had ever run for public office.
Over the last few months, some of these school board candidates have been getting their message out to voters through candidate forums.
Yeah, News4JAX reporter Ariel Schiller has been at those forums. She has been talking with these board candidates at those events and in other interviews, and she's joining us now live with a closer look at these races. Ariel?
Kent, like you said, I've spoken to about 8 out of the 9 candidates that are running for school board. And looking at District 3 is interesting because we have current school board member Cindy Pearson, who's hoping for a second term. She's being challenged by Rebecca Nathanson, and she's one of 3 candidates in our area that's endorsed by Governor Ron DeSantis. I caught up with both candidates today. They were both in good spirits, visiting polling places throughout District 3. I spoke with current school board member Cindy Pearson about her hopes for a second term. What are your platform points and what are you hoping to accomplish if you're reelected?
Sure. On the budget front is bringing our expenses in line with our revenue. And on the student achievement front, it's bringing us up into the top of the Big 7 districts. And then with neighborhood schools, making sure we have pathways in every neighborhood in Duval County where parents feel comfortable that they have a choice they like from elementary to middle to high school.
I also spoke with Rebecca Nathanson, who shared what she's hoping to accomplish if she's elected.
Literacy rates, and I think we can tackle those with a laser focus on the comprehensive evidence-based reading plan, but also that ties into funding. If we can look at how our dollars are allocated and funnel more of them to the classroom, I think we can address some of those issues, perhaps with more paraprofessionals or more teaching resources for teachers, or hopefully maybe reducing class size to help with that. But the other big priority I have is to address student safety. A lot of families are leaving the school district in the middle school years, and I hear from parents over and over again it's related to school safety and classroom discipline.
Now, the other races in the school board races are districts 1, 5, and 7. All of those school board seats will have new faces in a few months, but District 5 does have the potential to go to a runoff because there are 3 candidates running for that seat, but we'll have to see what those results tell us. Reporting live, Ariel Schiller, Channel 4, the local station.
Ariel, thank you. We are turning now again to our roundtable. We're going to start with Chris Hand, who is not only one of our political experts here, but he also is a parent of a student who is in public schools in Duval County. So as a parent, what are the big issues for you?
Well, I think there's a number of them, and not just a parent, but I'm a graduate of the Duval County Public Schools, and my mother was a Duval County Public School teacher for almost 4 decades. Wow. I think the school, I mean, as we talked about at different points throughout this election, this is really a pivotal time for the Duval County Public Schools. They face new leadership. You know, Christopher Bernier is the new superintendent since July the 1st, but also a series of very tough decisions. They're facing very difficult funding challenges because of changes in state law, because of inflation and other factors. So the school system trying to figure out how they're going to grapple with those funding challenges, which have other impacts, like what we've heard about the proposed facilities closure plan, the possibility that some schools kind of might have to close as a school board tries to work a funding gap. Then, of course, there's always the issues of student achievement and student attendance. So making sure all those issues go directly to the point, Joy, of making sure that our students have the support they need to succeed academically, that our teachers have the support they need to make sure students succeed. All that comes together at a very critical time for the Duval County School Board with these elections tonight, with the majority of the board at stake.
John Newman, I'll pose this to you. One of our colleagues had actually asked, hey, so what really is the level of importance? What power does a school board member have when the school district still has a superintendent? Maybe you could explain the dynamics there. The school board member is really important in that leadership structure, right?
The school board member is extremely important. That person is hands-on in that district, knows the pulse and the temperature of parents, ought to at least, and make a tremendous impact and difference on policy. I think it's critical, particularly as what Chris was talking about, some of the things that are facing the district and the impact of the politicization of the school district. That is hurtful, I think, ultimately this whole process, because parents really are in a quandary right now as to what to do with their children as it relates to putting them in charter school or putting them in private school. A lot of that's going into the enrollment decrease and so forth and so on. So I think it's really important that, as much as possible, that they depoliticize this in terms of the school board so they can really meet needs and not meet other folks' expectations.
And we're not going to take anything away from Rick Mullaney, who, like Chris, one of your parents was an educator in Duval. You went to Duval County Public Schools as well. What do you look for? What are the key things for choosing a board member in Duval County?
Well, for the board, one of the board members are going to have, and this is to their advantage, is a historic decision by Jacksonville voters to invest in public schools. Remember, not that long ago, a couple years ago, we're talking about a half-cent sales tax to invest $1.9 billion in capital improvements. Soon after that, another referendum passed by the people of Duval County, a millage increase to pay teachers better. We want to have better schools, but I want you to think about a county that is growing. It's gone from 800 to 900 to over 1 million people, and while that's been happening, our enrollment has been decreasing from 130,000 to 110,000 to now under 100,000 students in the Duval County public schools. You've seen a flight to adjacent counties, to charter schools, to private schools. This is a critical juncture for public education in Duval County. We have a new superintendent. We're going to have a number of new school board members. One of the few incumbents, the only incumbent tonight to won a very close race, and that is Cindy Pearson. And so these races are important, but critical decisions are going to be made with regard to public education here in Duval County, and I think we're facing historic challenges with decreased enrollment, potential consolidation, a facilities master plan that they're working on, how to spend this money. It really is an important time for public education in Duval County.
All right, Rick, John, Chris, thank you. Don't go anywhere. Right. We're going to be talking more with you. I'll never live look, though, for you at the United Center in Chicago tonight as day 2 of the Democratic National Convention is underway.
Yeah, coming up, we're going to check back in with Scott Johnson, who will be live from Chicago after catching up with a number of Florida delegates while he's been there.
See Leak kick Shore's ass.
Yes, Sasha, I hear you. Can you see and hear my signal?
Well, polls in Northeast Florida, they've been closed about an hour and a half now.
As more results come in, we're getting a clearer picture of the outcome in some of the key races.
We saw some of those results we were showing you just before we started there, but this is a look at the Republican primary for State Senate District 7, that heated race between David Shore and Tom Leake. The winner here is going to be Tom Leake, it certainly looks like, but you see only 41% reporting at this point. The winner is going to face Democrat George T. Hill in the general election in November.
And now looking at one of the 4 Duval County School Board seats that was on the ballot today, District 3 was the only one where a board member was seeking re-election. That was Cindy Pearson going up against Rebecca Nathanson, and Cindy Pearson is 51% of the vote to Rebecca's 49%. Now, this election cycle, every seat in the Florida House is up for election, along with half of the seats in the Florida Senate.
Yeah, some of the Northeast Florida seats had primaries today, so here's a look at just a few of them. We're going to start with State Senate District 5. It lies entirely within Duval County, almost entirely within the I-295 Beltway, but also stretching west to the Cecil Commerce area. Incumbent Democrat Tracy Davis seeking re-election in District 5. She faced a primary challenger, Frankie Genti. 95% of the votes to the incumbent, and Senator Tracy Davis is going back to Tallahassee. No Republicans entered this race. There was a write-in candidate who filed for the general election, so she will have to run in November as well.
Shifting over to the Florida House, we start with District 13, which includes much of northwest Jacksonville and the near west side. Democrat Angie Nixon seeking re-election there, as you can see, with 81% of the votes in. She has 81% to Brenda Priestley Jackson's 19%. Brenda Priestley Jackson, a former Duval County School Board member and Jacksonville City Council member.
District 14 includes parts of east side and north side of Duval County, including Arlington. That's the map right there for you. Democratic incumbent Kimberly Daniels facing 2 primary challengers. Florida House District 14 here. Daniels against Lloyd Calker and Teresa Wakefield Gamble. Daniels coming out the winner tonight with 64% of the vote.
And now let's take a look at District 18. That includes the northern half of St. Johns County. Florida House District 18, that was an open seat. Republican Cindy Stevenson, first elected to the House in 2015, can't run again because of term limits. The Republican primary included Kim Kendall, who used to be a former FAA air traffic controller, and Nick Primrose, the chief in regulatory compliance at Jacksport. You see Kim Kendall there with 58% of the vote. Almost all of the votes are in. Nick Primrose with 42%. Next, the winner faces Democrat Keith Matthews, who has no primary opponent in the general election in November.
All right, so as we've told you, there's only one statewide race in today's Florida primary election.
It was the Republican and Democratic primaries for U.S. Senate, setting up the general election for the seat currently held by former Governor Rick Scott. Scott faced 2 challengers in his Republican primary. There you see the results. Overwhelmingly, Rick Scott winning this race, 84%. Next closest person is Keith Gross, 9%, and John Columbus, 6%.
On the Democratic side, it was a bit lopsided as well. Debbie McCarcel Powell, the former U.S. representative, with 69% of the votes, more than 703,000 voting for her. John Acebas joins again with a county-by-county look at these 2 U.S. Senate primaries. John?
Yeah, absolutely. When we were reading the AP poll reports, this is kind of what was suggested, a Rick Scott, Debbie McCarcel Powell showdown, but we'll take a look at the numbers from a statewide perspective here. This is a color-coded map, so the red you see here is reflective of Debbie McCarcel Powell, who has 69% of the votes and over 704,000 votes. I'll put on the heat map, and that heat map is going to tell you which of these races were a little bit closer, but as you see here, you'll see some of the lighter shaded red, but it's still not reflective of that being close at all. It's almost like a courtesy shade there, because these races are just not close. If we're here in Gilchrist County, 58%, but what I can do, I'll take off the heat. What we did see is Stanley Campbell won in Gadsden County. These are a little bit smaller counties that he won. 43% of the votes out of a total 7,800 votes there in Liberty County, another small county, just 513 votes. But he won 38% and 194 of those votes. This is all precincts reporting and 99% of the votes. Let's go ahead and go to the Republican primary here. Rick Scott, 2-time governor, and of course the incumbent, an absolute landslide. Let's see if I can put on the totals here. 1.2 million votes. The next closest, Keith gross, a 133,009% of those votes. But again, another deep red map. This is Rick Scott absolutely in a landslide here in the state of Florida. I'll put in the heat. These are light, but again, it's almost like a courtesy shade because all these are landslides. The only one we don't have, I believe, is Holmes. That's because that's in that central time zone, so we don't have any checked-in votes for Holmes County. But as we expected, Rick Scott, the incumbent, winning in a landslide so far here in Florida. As the night goes on, of course, we'll have more results.
All right, thank you, John. Well, right now in Chicago, the second night of the Democratic National Convention is underway, building up to tonight's headliner, former President Barack Obama.
Thursday night, Vice President Kamala Harris will formally accept her party's nomination for president. And all week, the delegates are focused on putting together their party's plan for a victory in November. News4JAX reporter Scott Johnson live at the United Center. Scott, you talked with the head of the Florida Democratic Party.
I did, and she is saying a lot, along with a lot of Democrats out here. Nikki Fried is who I spoke with. She ran for governor against, tried to run against Governor DeSantis this last election cycle, as we covered a lot here on News4JAX. But I talked to her here at the DNC. She's been kind of leading the Florida delegation every morning, and one thing she talked about, because we were talking about this primary that you're watching right now here on News4JAX, was she was pointing to that Republican primary that we've been monitoring here for weeks, and you've seen all over the airwaves, Tom Leak, David Shore, which I brought you this story about a week and a half ago, that some people are calling it a proxy fight between Governor DeSantis, who has endorsed Leak, and former President Trump, who has endorsed Shore. And so the Democrats are kind of seizing on that. They are saying, and they're portraying themselves as a unified party right now behind Vice President Harris. They are trying to portray their opponents, the Republicans, and is maybe not as united as they are going into November.
There's not. I have been saying this for years, that there is not unity between them. I mean, I have firsthand knowledge of the rifts inside of the Republican Party. You saw that on the presidential level when Ron DeSantis thought that he was going to take out Donald Trump. You saw those words exchanged. And so you're going to see that that divide is also what's going to end up in a Democratic victory. We are united. We are energized. We are organized.
And so that is the image Democrats are really trying to portray here, even though it has been a rough couple months. As you know, President Biden saying he will not run again weeks ago, and then Vice President Kamala Harris is elevated to the candidate in quite short order. She is nominated as the candidate. Before this event even started, here a few weeks ago, it was an online vote. She will formally accept the nomination, but you can expect on the opposite side here, Republicans will try and find any wedge they can in the Democratic coalition. We will, of course, be monitoring how that unfolds, both sides, going into November. But right now, there is a lot of politicking, as you can expect. It is that time of year. For now, we are live in Chicago at the DNC. Scott Johnson, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Scott, thanks.
All right, so we want to bring our roundtable back now, and a brief setup here. The distinction that the two parties are trying to draw between each other is already something we're seeing play out in TV ads when it comes to the U.S. Senate race. Here's a portion of a campaign commercial from Rick Scott. It's not so much focused on his Senate race, but plays to the broader partisan battle.
We did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
Yep. They did it all right. Now everything is more expensive.
Yeah, you didn't see them on your primary ballot there, but in November, that's going to be some of the theme that we see here. Rick, lean into this for us. What's your view? This is kind of what we expected, that we'll see Rick Scott, Debbie McCarcel-Powell, that U.S. Senate race, and it's one of the many Senate races that people will be watching across the country.
They're going to be defining this very differently. What you just heard from Rick Scott is how he's going to try to define Kamala Harris, and that is inflation, and that is spending, and that I think what you're going to hear him talk about is her votes as vice president when she was presiding over the Senate were actually more consequential than her votes when she was in the Senate. And that's going to mean the American Rescue Plan and inflation and spending. I think he's going to try to define it that way. On the other hand, you can expect from the Democratic side, it's going to be about abortion. And the timing, because of the amendment, because of Amendment 4 being on the ballot, is very, very helpful. On the Democratic side, this may be more competitive, in part because of that amendment. And with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, that's an advantage over having Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. But the battle here will be whoever defines the issue wins the argument, is an old adage in the practice of law. Rick Scott is going to try to define her as being part of the Biden-Harris administration when it comes to inflation, immigration, crime, and energy. On the opposite side, you're going to see the argument on abortion, health care, climate change. Expect to see a clash of competing policy and political issues come November. It will be hard fought. Rick Scott is the favorite, but this could be much closer than people think. He has a track record of winning close races, but there's a lot of time between now and November.
Chris Hand, so if you're an assumed shoo-in like Rick Scott was, why spend so much money campaigning? Already spent $27 million on his reelection, millions of his own money. What's the need for that?
Well, because you only get elected to the Senate every 6 years, and there are a lot of new residents coming to Florida during that period of time. A lot of folks who don't know who Rick Scott is. In some recent polling we've seen, a surprisingly large number of Republicans and Democrats and independents didn't know that Rick Scott was their incumbent United States Senator. So there's always a need, no matter how long you've been in politics, to introduce and reintroduce yourself to the voters. But, Joe, I think this comes down to it's going to be a really interesting question this fall, is how competitive is Florida generally at the statewide level? How close will the presidential contest be? How close will the U.S. Senate contest be? Rick just alluded to this, but here are the margins by which Rick Scott has won his last 3 statewide elections. 1%, 1%, 10,000 votes. So he is accustomed to running really close elections. We'll have to see if that's the case again here in November. It's going to be determined a lot by what happens at the top of the ballot in the presidential race and some of these other factors like amendments and other issues, how they play into the campaign.
Yeah, John Newman, what's the antidote? What's the response from, in this case, the Democrat Debbie McCarcel-Powell, if she's getting hit with, you're tied to what we see at the top of the ticket? Isn't it the same for a Democrat to say, well, Senator Scott, Republican supporter of Donald Trump?
The other aspects of the antics and the atmospherics that he brings to the table, they're going to label that to Rick Scott. And that can have an impact. And right now, the Democratic Party is ahead of the Republican Party in terms of the ground game with the presidential election around the country. That could impact the turnout in Florida. So even though Florida's got 1 million more registered voters right now, they're doing well there. But in the villages, you're having consistent Harris rallies with 500 golf carts. That's an indicator.
Isn't it amazing? 5 weeks ago, we were at a completely different look at what the presidential race would be and how it all filters out to the Senate races and everything else, the House of Representatives. It's really changed a lot in that time.
And, you know, I found it interesting. Rick Scott, his commercial targeted Kamala Harris, not his presumed opponent in November. Why?
Because he knew he was going to win tonight, and he knows that November is what the contest is all about.
So why not go after her now while you have the chance?
You first have to win, but I think he did that ad with that in mind. He's got an eye towards November. He clearly does.
All right, thank you to our roundtable. We'll be visiting with you some more here before we get done with our special coverage of election. All right, you didn't see them on the ballot for the primary, but in November there are some major amendments in Florida that will be voted on.
Still ahead, a conversation with our panelists on the legalization regarding topics like marijuana and abortion access.
Can you see him in the back? Can you see him? You see him on the stage?
No, you can't see him on the stage. You see like the flag and stuff.
Okay. know when when you cue me.
St. Johns County voters face choices in some heated races this election. As we mentioned, State Senate District 7, and then that race between David Shore and Tom Leake. It includes St. Johns County.
Republican voters there also had a primary election for sheriff on their ballots. Sheriff Rob Hardwick is seeking a second term, and it looks like he will get that. Challenging him, Jim Priester, a 27-year veteran of the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, who retired in order to run for sheriff. News4JAX reporter Janice Harris joining us now from the watch party for Sheriff Hardwick. Janice?
And it is now a celebration at what initially was a watch party here right behind me for Sheriff Hardwick, as he will now serve a second term as the sheriff for St. Johns County. Definitely a celebratory event here inside of the barn here in St. Johns County, where there are many of his supporters extremely excited about the fact that he has won his second term. In addition to that, we're going to hear from him in just a couple of minutes. Right now, he's been shaking hands and taking photos with his supporters, also very happy about this second term that he will have. In addition to that, we've also been following the Senate seat for District 7. Yes, I am live. One of his supporters asking if we are live. Shifting gears for just a moment from the sheriff's race to the Senate seat for District 7. Hearing right now from the FRSCC, they put out a statement specifically about the primary election, saying that they want to go ahead in advance and to congratulate Tom Leake, among many others that they also were supporting, Keith Truenow, Randy Fine, and Ed Hooper, on their decisive primary wins. Candidates matter, and these gentlemen have proven records of delivering for the folks they serve. As you might recall, that was also a race where we'd seen some very interesting ads from Shore and also from Leake during this race, but the FRSCC already congratulating him. But again, back here at the watch party, now a celebration party for Sheriff Hardwick. We'll hear from him in just a couple of minutes about his second term and what he plans to do next as sheriff in St. Johns County. Reporting live, Janice Harris, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you so much, Janice. And in the general election, Florida voters will face choices on 6 proposed constitutional amendments.
You've likely heard of a few of them. In fact, TV ads are already airing on one of the issues. That's Amendment 3, which would legalize recreational marijuana for adults in Florida. Right now, medical marijuana is permitted, so this amendment would expand on that. Amendment 4 deals with the issue of abortion. If that passes, it would block any law from prohibiting, delaying, restricting abortion before viability, or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's health care provider. Another amendment getting attention, Amendment 1, which deals with school board elections. We've been talking about that tonight. If it passes, starting in 2026, board members would be elected with partisan elections. Right now, those races are designated nonpartisan.
Yeah, bringing our roundtable back here. John Newman, what do you think is the most consequential, or what do you think about these amendments being on the ballot? A reminder, they have to pass with 60% of the voters saying yes.
I would think that in order of the amendments, that 1 is probably 3. And the most important is going to be access to women's health care. And certainly it's going to be important in terms of legalization of marijuana, because it affects across demographic. It affects the elderly, who oftentimes people don't realize they're taking it to help them, but also recreationally, that it's going to pass because I think that's where the body politic is. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be that access to women's health care on the ballot. That's going to be the biggest one.
Let's talk about marijuana. This is the 5th time to attempt to legalize marijuana in the state. Got kind of close before, but do you see this passing in November?
Yes.
I've been dropping the mic.
I've been a couple of times. Yeah. The polling suggests that it will. Now, remember, already statewide, you've passed marijuana use for medical purposes.
Yes.
You see a lot of money behind this. You see the trend lines. The initial polling suggests that it's going to pass. Not as strong as Amendment 4, and I do agree with John. Amendment 4 is the real big one here. That Amendment 4 could have consequences beyond simply that issue alone, by the way, which is a significant issue. Potential impact on the presidential race is. Earlier, we were talking about the U.S. Senate race. What does it do in terms of turnout? What does it do in terms of your base? All of that tends to be advantage on the Democratic side. But on the marijuana side, the polling suggests this is a closer one. And there's a lot of back and forth here. The pros and cons of this will be much debated. You're going to see a lot of ads on this as we go through Election Day. But in the end, the polling suggests it's going to pass much closer. You can expect Amendment 4 very likely to pass on women's health, on the abortion issue.
Yeah, Chris Hand, how do you get an issue like that, an amendment passed with 60%, because usually we're a little closer than that. This is a big deal to get past that threshold.
Well, it is, and I was going to talk about what are those stakes and how do you actually get there. In 2006, Florida voters changed the Constitution to require 60% plus 1 of the vote to pass a constitutional amendment. As Rick said, several of these amendments, both Amendment 4 and Amendment 3, right now, according to polling, are above that 60% threshold. But there's going to be a ton of money invested in these amendments between now and November. A variety of public figures who are going to invest a lot of their own political capital. For example, Governor Ron DeSantis has already made it clear he's going to oppose both Amendment 4 and Amendment 3, and so it'll be interesting to see how that campaign, both pro and con, comes together. But let's not forget about Amendment 1. There's going to be a lot of focus on Amendment 4. I agree. That's a sort of a fundamental freedom issue here in Florida. It's going to be discussed. Amendment 3, obviously, a potentially huge economic impact. But Amendment 1 goes to what we've been talking about at several other points tonight. The issue of whether or not we politicize school boards.
It seems like we're already there.
Well, it does, but right. This would really, Joy, this would be the final kind of unmasking of that process. And it's interesting, as we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it was in 1998 that Florida voters made it very clear they wanted school board races to be nonpartisan. This would be a reversal of that previous decision if it were to pass, but that also requires 60% plus 1. I think that amendment far less likely to get the majority approval it needs than Amendment 3 or Amendment 4.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to our roundtable.
Yes. Well, it has now been nearly 2 hours since polls have closed. Stick with us. We are going to take a little break here. Some races clearly decided, but we will be right back.
I'm not getting anywhere. Jalen, I need help. I'm not getting anywhere with the producer here.
Sasha, can you hear us? Okay, so how much time do we have?
Now the mics are open. Okay. All right, so when we come to the round table. All right, primary election night. Thanks for watching us on our special here. It's now been, 2 hours since the polls closed, almost, in Northeast Florida. Some races really clearly have been decided. Still some very close ones out there.
In the closely watched Republican primary for State Senate District 7, Tom Leek has been declared the winner over David Shore and Jerry James. 93% of the votes in. Tom Leek with 47% of the vote over David Shore's 27%. Of note, in St. Johns County, where Shore was sheriff for 16 years, you see he is in second place here behind Leek and Jerry James in third.
One of 4 Duval County School Board races very close tonight. In District 3, incumbent Cindy Pearson with that narrow lead over a challenger, Rebecca Nathanson. All precincts are reporting. But the Duval County Supervisor of Elections website shows there are about 800 mail-in ballots countywide that still need to be counted. So we don't know how many of them could potentially include this particular race.
For the District 7 Senate seat, covering St. Johns, Putnam, Flagler, and northern Volusia counties, Jerry James, Tom Leek, David Shore, all Republican. You've likely seen all the ads on TV, the highly talked about race. Due to term limits, the incumbent, State Senator Travis Hudson, not seeking re-election in District 7. So now, between Tom Leek and David Shore, the one endorsed by former President Donald Trump, Leek endorsed by a whole host of Florida sheriffs. The winner faces Democrat George Anthony T. Hill, the second in the general election in November.
And for showing you those results just a moment ago, looks pretty clear that Tom Leek's going to come out with the majority of the, more votes than the other 2 candidates there. So with our roundtable tonight, let's just start and we'll go clockwise here. Rick Mullaney, tell us what your final thoughts are here, Florida primary night in 2024.
Well, I don't think there are a whole lot of surprises in the primary. What it points to is a historic November is looming. The balance of power in the House, for example, is looming, and Florida in 2022 played a critical role in that going on the Republican side, and Governor DeSantis played a critical role in 2022 in Florida going red. So now look to November in the House. The same in the Senate. Remember, the Republicans have an advantage on that map, the balance of power in the Senate, with 23 of the 33 votes in which Democrats are the incumbent. But tonight is setting up a big match for November. And in Florida, as we talked about earlier, 3 big amendments on the ballot for Floridians. One question is going to be what potential impact might they have beyond just the amendments, and that means House races, Senate races, the presidential race. Get ready for a historic November and a very consequential election in November.
And John Newman, I know in the beginning, before we even started tonight, you were curious about some of the state House races. Anything else now that those votes are in? What are you thinking about?
I think it turned out the way that it was expected to, as far as those House races 13 and 14. They turned out that way. But also, I think, to my friend Rick, what he just said, I think to borrow from Malcolm Gladwell, we're at a tipping point in terms of where we are in terms of the election season coming up. I think all the money that's being poured in by the proxies, I think that cheapens the process. And I'm concerned as we go forward that we don't actually make it so much worse than it really has to be.
Chris Hand, you get a final word here. Your final thoughts as we wrap up our coverage of the Florida primary tonight.
Well, Ken and Joy, we've talked a lot about what did happen tonight, and let's talk a little about what didn't happen. And here in Duval County, 80% of voters actually didn't go to the polls and cast a ballot. And we've seen that low turnout really throughout Florida. There are some counties that are even lower than Duval County was tonight. Just think of how impactful this election was. Essentially, a majority of the Duval County School Board was determined, seats for the Florida House and the Florida Senate, important judgeships. There was a lot at stake on this ballot in Duval County and ballots around the state. I think we've got to do better in the future in terms of turnout and figure out kind of what different levels of government and the citizenry itself can do to help make sure people come out. And of course, there's a very soon chance to improve those numbers. That's on November 5th when we'll go to the polls and vote for a variety of races, including the next president of the United States.
It's coming very soon, right?
Doesn't that always seem like the struggle, though, is to get people interested, to get them out and vote? And it's almost like we've made it so easy with mail-in ballots. The only thing we haven't done is electronically, where you can just go on your phone and just type in your vote. But, you know, how do you do that?
But it shows that there's something else going on because it's so easy to do. Why aren't they doing it? I think it's because of the impact of the deterioration of our body politic because of how money is being used in politics.
our roundtable. Always love talking with you. And tell you what, make your reservation November 5th. Be back with us.
You guys busy?
I'm making my plans to have this kind of conversation with you again. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us for our special coverage tonight of Florida's primary election.
We will have another look at the biggest races ahead of the 10 o'clock news. And you can find results anytime on newsforjax.com. So in the meantime, we will see you at 10 o'clock.
From Channel 4, the local station, this is a Vote 2024 update.
And hello, everyone. Most of tonight's races in Florida's primary election have now been decided.
In case you're just tuning in, here's a look at some of the top races we've been following tonight. In the state Senate District 7 Republican primary, Tom Leake won, defeating former St. Johns County the Sheriff David Shore by a wide margin, with Jerry James in third. Leake will now face the Democrat George T. Hill in the general election.
A close race on the Duval County School Board District 3, the only seat where there was an incumbent seeking another term. And right now, the incumbent, Cindy Pearson, with that narrow lead over Rebecca Nathanson with about 300 votes between them. All precincts are reporting in Duval County, but elections officials are still counting some mail-in ballots from across the area.
St. Johns County Sheriff Rob Hardwick easily won his Republican primary over Jim Priester. Hardwick's only opponent in the general election will be a write-in candidate.
And the only statewide races tonight were the primaries for the U.S. Senate in Florida. Republican Senator Rick Scott easily won his party's primary. His two challengers very far behind.
That sets up his general election matchup against Debbie McCarsell Powell, who won the Democratic primary easily over her three opponents.
And taking a live look now at the Democratic National Convention, where the second night is underway in Chicago. The state's going through the ceremonial roll call vote right now. At the end of the night tonight, we're going to hear from former President Barack Obama, former First Lady Michelle Obama, also expected to speak tonight at the DNC.
And we'll also hear from Kamala Harris's husband, who will be talking about her personally on a personal level. Folks, we will be back at 10 with another look at the top races of the night and live reports from Scott Johnson at the DNC in Chicago.
We'll see you in another hour.
3, 2, 1. All right, here we go in 3, 2. Temperatures are starting to moderate downward. Rain chances, though, they're moving up. So we'll make it an 8 here as we look ahead to the hump of the work week. But this number is going to be going down as those rain chances are moving up. And I don't know what that is. Let's do take 2. Take 2. In 3, 2. Okay, here we go. In 3, 2. Temperatures are starting to come back closer to our seasonal averages. We'll find those lower 90s with increasing rain chances. So for that, we'll give it an 8 here as we hit the hump of the work week. But our number will be coming down as... Oh, that was my bad. I'm hitting the wrong button. Ding-a-ding-a-ding-a-ding. In 3. Take 3. In 3, 2. Not as hot as we hit the hump of the work week. Scattered chance for some showers and storms develop throughout the afternoon. That's why we'll make it an 8 here on the Nutometer. But that number is going to be going down as rain chances are moving up the rest of the work week. We'll see you for that and your weekend forecast at 5 on 4. Finally.